Watching him work is both incredibly mesmerizing, but also a bit infuriating at the same time. He's such an incredible artist, but all of his female characters have the exact same face. Stjepan Sejic. Stjepan Sejic. Okay, I think I got it. If you've never seen an episode of Illustrator Reacts to Good and Bad Comic Art, I'll leave a link to the playlist in the description, but basically, my name's Christian Pearson, I've been a professional illustrator and animator for about 7 years now, and basically, in this series, I look at some artwork from some top-tier industry professionals, and I talk about their process, and break down what's going right in some of their best art, and occasionally what's going not so right in some of their less than stellar work. Though, admittedly, even when I look at some of the less than stellar stuff, I'm usually defending the artist and what they've done in the piece, because these are all artists that are doing thousands of drawings a year, and you can't do that without doing the occasional dud cover or panel. Unless maybe you're this first artist who seems to do absolutely nothing wrong ever somehow. When I look at anything Jung Gi has done, the first thing to come to my mind is just the term chaotic masterpiece. It's like every single section you zoom into, there's some new event happening that you didn't see earlier. I love how he's separated the background buildings by doing them in a lighter washed ink. And then in the foreground slash, I guess, middle distance, we've got these two characters in the middle about to clash, and you can really feel that the two sides of this battle are just about to collide. And this piece specifically, admittedly, wasn't actually comic book work he did. It was a collaboration he did with Blizzard for World of Warcraft, but he has done lots of work for Marvel and DC, and pretty much any company that has anything to do with art wants Jung Gi doing stuff for them because he's just such a mind-blowing artist. And a large part of that is his process, because he doesn't do any rough drawings or construction lines. Most artists, when they're working and starting out with a piece, they'll start with some rougher shapes to kind of block out the pose of the character and the composition of the image so they can decide, okay, I like the layout of this image, and then they'll start building the details on top, maybe erase things out a little bit. But Jung Gi just starts right into inking. He just puts pen to paper and starts. And he's using inks right off the bat, so he can't erase anything. And well, he'll sometimes say, oh, I made a mistake here or here. Almost nothing in his work ever actually looks like a mistake. And he's making these images that are so epic and huge and have so many characters, and he doesn't have to do any layout work to start. He just jumps into it. As an illustrator myself, watching him work is both incredibly mesmerizing, but also a bit infuriating at the same time. Because a lot of the time, the appeal of watching other artists work is you can see their process, you can kind of see what they're thinking and learn from it. But with Jung Gi, I can't really learn that much from watching him work because I have no idea what he's thinking. It's like he's some kind of crazy art printing machine. If there is an art god, it's probably Jung Gi. It's so exaggerated and aggressive looking. Everything in Joe Matterera's work will be pushed to its limits. If you've got a character like Venom or the Hulk who's supposed to be big, he'll make them huge. If you've got a character that's supposed to be buff and bulky, he'll make them as shredded and muscular as he can. His style of anatomy is just, it's so cool looking. Subjective, I know, I'm sorry. But another thing that I really love about his work is how he'll frame things in his images. Even in this piece, Black Panther is framed inside Venom's body. Also, mad props to the colorist on this piece, Christian Lichtner, for managing to make a character that is predominantly all black stand out against another character that is pretty generally drawn all black themselves. He made him a bit more blue and used that sort of red lighting around Black Panther to help him pop out. Looking at Joe Madureira's work on Avenging Spider-Man, he'll use a monster's mouth to frame characters, or a shockwave, or even a ring of dying seagulls. And then also a lot of his work will have kind of a section of chaos, 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 and then the main focus of the image will be framed by a section of just textured background or kind of just nothing. He's really good at getting you to focus on the things that he wants you to focus on, which is an easy thing to overlook in his work, because a lot of the time when I'm even looking at his work, I'm just going, oh, the way you do anatomy is so cool. And Joe Madureira doesn't actually do that much comic book work anymore, if at all. He's actually moved on to working predominantly in video games. He did a bunch of work on designs for the video game Darksiders, and a lot of his work on that's really cool looking. And more recently, he actually co-created a video game called Battle Chasers based off an old original comic of his from, I think, the 90s? And I mean, I would love if he came back to working in comics, but a lot of the stuff he's doing in video games is really awesome looking too. I recommend checking it out. Okay, wait. Stjepan Sejic. Stjepan Sejic. Stjepan Sejic. Okay, I think I got it. I've never had to say his name out loud before, and just from looking at the spelling, I never would have figured it out. His style is so unique. It almost looks like he's a concept artist more so than a comic book artist. The things about his work that I personally think stand out the most are how he uses texture, the way he does expressions, and how he draws his female characters. That's something I really like about his work. A lot of comic book artists will lean more into the sexuality of the female characters instead of making them look like superheroes who are ready for a fight. And Stjepan Sejic absolutely draws his female characters as if they mean business. They're ready for a scrap. But what's really cool about his work is I actually like looking at a lot of his rough work more so than his finished stuff. A lot of his test art where he's just warming up that he's posted online is just all so cool looking. He has such a unique way of doing his rough drawings that I think is just really nice. The thing that caught me most about this one is this creature in the background, the detailing and the sort of moist texture on its teeth and lips. And that in contrast to the texture of Aquaman's scales and Aquaman's facial hair. I think this image really does a good job showing off how Stjepan Sejic does textures. I have so much respect for this Spider-Man art. Todd McFarlane has influenced the way that Spider-Man looks and moves more than anyone besides, obviously, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, who created him in the 60s. But when Todd McFarlane took on Spider-Man in 1988, he totally changed the dynamism of Spider-Man's poses. Before that, this is kind of how Spider-Man was drawn. He still moved in a pretty dynamic, interesting way because web swinging is different from how any other comic character moves. But Todd McFarlane took the idea that Spider-Man's bones are supposed to be more elasticy and he's supposed to be very flexible, and he just pushed it to its limits. He made Spider-Man bend and twist in impossible ways, but it works so well for a character like Spider-Man because he's supposed to be able to move in impossible ways. And he also did other things, like he changed how Spider-Man's webbing looked. He, both in terms of the webbing on the suit and the webbing that Spider-Man shoots. The webbing that he shoots became very crazy and spaghetti gangly, and that's one of the parts of his art that I love the most. And then in terms of the webbing on the suit, he made it much more detailed and just a lot more webbing. My personal tastes, I don't love how McFarlane draws Spider-Man, just because I personally like slightly cartoonier art and when more detailing is done in the coloring stage than in the inking, and McFarlane's Spider-Man work is very ink heavy. But again, that's purely personal taste, not a comment on the quality, because I am so happy with what McFarlane did for Spider-Man in the 80s. And for anyone that doesn't know Todd McFarlane's work, he's done a lot of other big stuff in comics. He co-created Venom, and he created Spawn, who's arguably the most famous Image Comics character. He doesn't do that much comic book art anymore nowadays. He's actually in the process right now of directing a Spawn movie. There was one in the 90s that personally I haven't seen. I've heard mixed things about it. But it's cool that the actual creator of the character is going to be directing the movie. Although, I don't think he's ever directed a movie before, so who knows how that could go. Also, Todd McFarlane, Canadian-born. Alright, the next artist we're going to talk about, it's going to be a little bit weirder because this is an artist that I personally really love, but I'm going to talk specifically about a problem with their work, and it's something that a lot of artists, even big-name professionals, can struggle with. And that's a thing called same face. J Scott Campbell has so much incredible artwork. I personally love so many of his covers, and there are so many things to praise about his work. But one thing that's very easy to spot when looking at any of his covers with multiple female characters is that they all have the exact same face. And this Mighty Avengers cover is a good example, because besides the hair and the color of the skin, all of the characters have the same face, just looking in a different direction. They all have the sort of ski slope nose, same head shape, same sort of lips and mouth, same sort of teeth even. Their eyes all are a bit bigger and have that kind of black eyeliner on them. And he's actually managed to make it sort of his brand. A lot of people love how he draws his female characters. I mean, it is very visually appealing. It's almost like he's drawing his own original character in the cosplay of other famous comic book characters, and people love it and they want to see it. But he also doesn't do very much interior comic book work anymore. Most of the stuff he does is things like variant covers and posters. A lot of aspiring comic book artists and illustrators will try replicating the work of artists that they really love. And a lot of people, including myself, love J Scott Campbell's work. But aspiring artists shouldn't take the lesson away from his work that it's okay to draw all of your characters with the same face and same body shape. Because especially if you're looking to do interiors, that is going to be very confusing from a storytelling standpoint. Especially when you cut to a close-up of a character, it'll likely be very difficult for your audience to tell who's who if all your characters have the same face. But I can't talk about J Scott Campbell and not go over one of my favorite covers of his, which was pretty recent. It was a variant cover he did for the 300th issue of Spawn. This is another one where I love the use of framing in it, because not only is the stonework and the stained glass window framing Spawn and bringing us down to him, but even his cape, that crazy red swirling cape that Spawn always has, is being used and sort of doing that toilet bowl effect that I've mentioned and twirling us in down towards the main focus, the main character. It's just so cool looking. So again, I want to make sure to emphasize, I think J Scott Campbell's an incredible artist. But just because drawing the same face and same body shape over and over and over again has worked out for him, does not mean it's going to work out for you. Now, I've realized there's not really much quote-unquote bad comic art in this episode, so to make sure I'm not lying in the title and people get their fix, here's a really weird drawing of Ms. Marvel that J. Scott Campbell did a while back for an Avengers vs. X-Men cover that I've always found just a bit odd looking and out of character for him. Ms. Marvel's got kind of a weirdly long neck, and her chin and jaw are doing something a little bit weird, and her body is a little bit more twisted than he'll usually do. But what can you say? Even the best will do some weird images now and then. Let's go back to talking about some really great stuff. This art is just so soothing and calming to look at. The way he does landscapes and environments is just gorgeous. And it's very easy for a lot of comic artists to get hung up specifically on how they draw characters and not work that much on environments. So when I see an artist that's just this fantastic at rendering out landscapes, it's just so impressive to see. Now, I'm not super familiar with Takehiko Inoue's work. I haven't read Vagabond before, but I've been recommended it by so many people, and I get it now. It's so detailed and it's got this realism to it that is just so much more impressive when you think about the fact that he's using just inks. And I watched this interview where he was talking about how he really likes using a brush pen because he likes how unpredictable it can be, which is just crazy to think about because looking at all of this, it all looks so deliberate. Even this image specifically I love because it's so detailed and there's crashing water against these rocks that all have lots of texture to them, going up to a character that's pretty detailed himself, but surrounded by just blank white. And he feels so serene in an image that has so much detail and busyness below it. But that character just sitting on his own with all the calm space around him. To be honest, before I started recording, I just sat here staring at this one. It almost feels like meditating, looking at a lot of his work. And from what I've looked at, there's a lot of really fantastic looking battle sequences in this series, but I was just so drawn to these calm, beautiful landscape and environment shots. I remember the first time I saw Sean Murphy and Matt Hollingsworth's art. It was in the story The Wake, which was written by Scott Snyder and is fantastic both for the writing and the art, and I just fell in love with it so much. It was the first super stylized art that I really fell in love with in comics. And these two paired together, their skills and style complement each other so perfectly. They're one of the best pairings I've seen in the comic book industry. Sean Murphy's art, it's very streaky and has textured inks, and his characters are very angular. And Matt Hollingsworth's colors have this watercolory texture to them, and a lot of the time they're very desaturated and using a limited color range, but then other times they'll just go full-blown vibrant, and somehow it just always works with Murphy's art. They're just so in sync artistically. They're currently working on a sequel to White Knight, and they worked on a series that Mark Miller wrote called Chrononauts, which I hadn't actually heard of before this, but I'm gonna have to go read it now. But anyway, something I've noticed specifically about Sean Murphy's art that I just noticed while I was looking at stuff for this video is he really likes these big pillars of black in his image, and he likes his work to be very vertical, like your eye is going down through the image. And I specifically love that in this art of Gordon, which you can see the colors, it's just this really vibrant, dark red to it. And I love that Hollingsworth's done this colored streak of smoke cutting through the black, so it's not too plain. There's some extra texture to it. And then you'll see, I assume this was Sean Murphy, around the bat signal, there's a texture in this ink that's supposed to be like, I guess, a bit of a cloud or something that looks like he just pressed his thumb or fingerprint into it. And that's just such a cool, weird thing to see in art like this. These two really are just a stylistic, dynamic duo. If you want a place to jump in on their work, I highly recommend The Wake. I've loved a lot of their stuff, but that one, the story, the art, fantastic. Alright everybody, that's all for this episode. I'm really sorry I haven't talked about Junji Ito or Frank Miller yet. Both of those artists are very fascinating individuals, and I want to do more research on them before I actually talk about them. But anyway, if you've got more artists you'd like to recommend, please leave them in the comments. If you haven't seen the other episodes, go back and check those out. These are so much fun for me to make. I put one out every 2 weeks, and be sure to check out a whole bunch of my other art, illustration, tutorial, animation videos, all that kind of fun stuff. And besides that, thank you all so much for watching. I'm Christian Pearson, this is Popcross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube, and I will see you all in the next one. Videos on Saturdays and Mondays, by the way. Okay everybody, goodbye.